Adding detail to subdivision surface models can become a bit of a balancing act between adding detail where you need it and not adding too much detail where you don't. And in order to look at this in a better context, we're going to take it in the light of a simple project. So what I'm going to do here is start from a completely blank slate, and we're going to go to the Layout tab. And here in the Layout tab, I'm in Meshes, and then I'm in the Human section of the Meshes. And I'm going to take this basic sculpt male, and it's the one with shoes on. Now this one will have toes, and so it gives us a lot of extra details that we're not going to worry about right now. This one just has shoes on the feet. So let's go ahead and double click on that. And you'll see that we get this character in our scene. Now he's just made out of polygons at the moment, but we're going to convert him to subdivision surfaces and then proceed to add more details to him to get something of a more kind of polished, usable character. So I'm going to go ahead and press Shift Tab to turn him into subds, and you'll see it stays mostly pretty nice. But if we take a little closer look here, you'll see that the hands aren't real suitable to look like real fingers. So we're going to want to make these look a bit more like gloves, just to make that work a little nicer. And the shoes don't really look like shoes; they look more like just blobby toeless feet. So we're going to fix that, and then we're also going to add a bit of a uniform here. So he'll need something to denote the fact that he's wearing shoes and that he's wearing pants and a shirt or something like that, so that you don't get the feeling that he's wearing one continuous jumpsuit that also happens to go all the way up over his head and face. Now we're not going to worry about detailing his full head and face right now. That's kind of beyond the scope of this lesson, but we're going to look at adding some details to the rest of the body. So with that, I'm going to hop back over to the Model tab, but keep in mind that you may want to set up your Layout tab or one of your other tabs, something like this, where you don't see wireframes and you have some decent lighting. If you have a graphics card that will work with the Advanced GL, I recommend turning that on. And then just so you can see my settings, I'm going to press the O key, and here under Advanced Options, I have just the lighting set to Scene plus Environment, which will give you a little bit of fill light. The background is set to Environment. Now if I have a more complex environment, you'll see that. Right now it's just the gradient. My display override is Render without wireframes, so that way I still get my little widgets and things around the corners, but it gets rid of all of the grid and everything else relatively easily. I even have anti-aliasing turned on. You could turn that off if it starts to bog your performance a bit. And then I have my transparency set to correct and my screen space reflection set to fast. That'll give you a pretty decent look at your models without having too much of a lag in performance. Though, like I said, you could feel free to turn off anti-aliasing if you're starting to get a bit of a slowdown. All right, so this happens to be zoomed in exactly where we want to start here. We're going to start with the feet and just work our way up because I think that the feet are kind of the first super obvious place that needs some adjustment. Now, when they're converted to subds, these feet just look kind of blobby. They're lacking in any kind of real detail or crispness, and they look kind of more like he's wearing really fluffy socks than boots. And we want these to look like boots. We're going to make this a sci-fi outfit, uniform kind of thing. So let's start here by taking the shoes. And now if these were real shoes, the sole of the shoe would be solid, would be flat. Now I don't want to completely flatten out the entire base of the shoe because I'd kind of like to keep something going on here on the arch where we've got a little bit of an upswing there. But I do want to kind of flatten out the rest. So what I'm going to do is actually first I'm going to go ahead and turn on symmetry. Make sure that your symmetry is set to X. If it's not, hold down Alt and then click here and make sure that it is set to X. And now I'm going to go ahead and select the bottom of this foot. You can see it's selected on the other side too, as well as the heel. And we're going to leave, actually here, let's even deselect this. So we're just going to do the back of the heel and this right here. And that's going to leave this area here untouched as we flatten this out. I'm going to set my action center to the origin and then just turn on the scale tool. Make sure that negative scale is turned off, and then we can just flatten this down. All right, so there we go. Now we've got something of a little bit flatter bottom of the foot, but it still has, the nice little bit of an arch there. And then what we're looking at here is we want to make this look as if it has, something on the sole of the boot. So we want to look as if there's some kind of rubber or something down here. And right now it just, again, looks like it's kind of rounded and blobby. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this entire loop around here, and I'm going to sharpen up the edges on both sides. So I'm going to hold the Control key and click on where it used to say edges, now says boundary up here in the top left. And now we've got those couple of edges selected. And I'm going to sharpen these. And what I do when I'm sharpening these right now is I'm going to set the weight to 30%. Now, if you recall, the weight is driven by the subdivision level. Now, I want these to be crisp but not overly sharp, so I'm going to go back in. After I do this, I'm going to set my surface subdivision level up to 4. So these will be essentially 75% of the way sharpened and should look pretty good. So let's go ahead and just click in the viewport, and initially here they're going to look super sharp because I don't have my subdivision set up correctly. So let's go over here in properties and go to surface and set the subdivision level up to 4. And there right away we see something that looks significantly better. Let's also set our render level to 4, so we're in parity there, should we need to go ahead and render anything. All right, so now as we go along here, we're going to have just a little bit of touch-up to do, and we need to just kind of fix this shoe so it has a little bit more of, kind of the look of the sole of a shoe. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take little pieces here. I'm going to set my action center to selection. Actually, yeah, that ought to work. So selection, since these are flat, it should go right along the ground. And I'm just going to pull out this way, and the same thing out here. And actually, I think on the outside of the shoe, I'm going to pull this entire edge over. And you can see that right now the arrow is tilting down a little bit. And if you get that, you'll probably want to change your selection from selection to either selection, center, auto axis, or just to automatic. Either way will get you locked in with the grid plane, so you're not pulling this down below the grid. So let's just pull this out a little bit here. And here from the bottom view, I can actually see this a bit better. So I'm just going to kind of even this out a little bit, so that I get more the look of, kind of a shoe and less the look of, something that's tapering very strangely at the bottom. All right, so I think something like that will at least give me a decent start. I can always come back and adjust this as much as I want. And now the other thing I want to do is I want to add some kind of a bit of a rim around here where we would have the connection of the upper part of the shoe to the sole. So right now this edge here is too close to the base for that to happen. So I'm going to use the slide functionality, which you can get to really quickly just by right-clicking on a selected edge and under modeling operations, which is the top thing here, choosing slide. So now as I click and drag left and right, you'll see that it's taking that edge and it's moving it along the surface and essentially just sliding the edge, just like it says. So I'm going to slide this upwards a ways, I think something like that. And now I'm going to select this entire loop around here, and I'm just going to use my bevel tool to bevel this out just a little bit. A couple of millimeters here. And now that's going to give me something like a little bit of a lip here. I think right now this is probably sticking out a little too far here at this corner. So what I can do is just go in to this edge right there, and I'll just slide it back and in. And you can go along and kind of massage this as much as you want, but I think right now that does it for the bottom of the shoe, and that's giving me something a bit more like what I had in mind. Now, other options you might have would be to make the tread swing up a little bit more on the heel or level it out on the sides, but right now I think that's pretty good, and I'm going to move on. So now, if we have a boot on, what we should see is the boot overlapping the pants here at some point, and we can't really do that with just what we have here. So this is going to be a place where we really do need to add in additional geometry in order to make something happen. And there are a couple of ways that I could do that, but the first thing is going to be to identify the edge that I want to put the boot on. In that case, I'm going to use this one right here. So it's falling like right on the calf, it's below the knee, it's not going to interrupt any of this geometry with the knee. I don't want this to be disruptive if I'm going to rig and animate this character later. I just want it to give something for visual aesthetics, and that's really all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in an extra edge loop just underneath that. So I'm going to select a couple of polys, Alt-C for loop slice or Option-C on a Mac, and I'm actually going to pull this edge all the way as far as it will go up to 0.5. Now, if you had selected the other way, that'll probably be 99.5, but either way, I'm getting it all the way up to the top. So I want to pull to the top until it just stops, okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen up both of these edges, but before I do that, I'm going to take this edge and make it a little bigger, so it's kind of like the outer edge of the boot moving up here. So I'm going to use my scale tool, and I'm going to set the action center just back to selection. So now you can see it's kind of along the lines of that selection. So as I scale outward, you'll see that it's scaling and keeping that selection nice and level. Okay, so let's go out just a little bit more. I'll probably overdo it here at first because I can always rein that back in. Now I'm going to double click to select that other edge and I'll sharpen these. So Shift W is once again our weight tool. I'm already set to 30%, so all I have to do is click in the viewport and we're there. All right, so that's looking close. Just now I had overshot this, but it's a little easier to see if you've overshot it. So I'm going to now just kind of rein that back in until it looks about right. And then I'm also going to take the whole thing and just move it upwards so that we get a little bit of kind of a lip there with the boot. And I think that's going to work out fairly well. Okay. All right, so let's continue on. Actually, while we're doing something like that, let's go ahead and do the exact same thing with the gloves here. So I wanted these to look more like gloves because the fingers look a little bit too hot dog fingery to me. So what I'm going to do is make this look like gloves because gloves are going to have less detail anyway. So let's go ahead and just add in a seam right here. So again, I'm just going to loop select here. And actually, I'll show you another way that I could do this. If I double click on this edge here and use the bevel tool, I'm going to have my round level set to 0, so I'm not changing anything. I'm just going to click and drag this out a little bit. All right, so a couple of millimeters. And then I'm going to do the same thing that I had done before. I'm going to select this edge here, go to my scale tool, scale it out. And again, I'm probably going to overshoot it a little bit, and that's fine. And then I'm going to pull it up just a little. And this one looks like it might need to go back a little bit. And then double click here, Shift W for my weight tool, and click. And actually that was pretty close. It looks like I went back just a little bit too far. So let's just pull it forward a little and just kind of give a little wheel around here to check and see. And yeah, sure enough, I think that works pretty well. And now, if you look at these, especially once we add in texture that's a separate texture, the glove to the sleeve, that's going to work pretty well as a gauntlet. All right, so continuing on, let's go ahead and add a belt because we want to see some separation between the pants and the shirt. Now, I could do the same kind of thing that I've done with the gloves and the boots with the shirt kind of hanging over the pants or the pants over the shirt, but I like a little bit more definition and a little bit more detail, so I'm going to go ahead and just add in a belt right here. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to use the area, I'm going to define the area that I want with a couple of loop slices. So let's do loop slice. I'm going to set my count up to 2 and my mode to symmetry. So now I'm adding these within the existing loop of polygons that was there. Let's go something maybe like that. I don't want to go too far out because it can cause me some issues. And now these two edges right here, so I just press L to select the loops, are going to be sharpened because this is going to be the base of the belt where it's attached to the character. So Shift W and click. All right, you can see it actually gets a little wider, so I may need to scale that down, but we'll leave it be for right now. And now let's select this entire loop here and just bevel the whole thing outwards. All right, so we click and bevel out, and you'll notice that since I'm beveling off of sharpened edges, these beveled edges are going to retain the actual sharpening. So just something to keep in mind there. All right. Okay, so this is getting close to being what I want. But what I want to see is I want to see some kind of buckle through here. And right now I only have a single edge down the middle. Now that can be okay, but I think it might be problematic in this instance because it's just going to not give me anywhere to actually put the buckle unless I attach something separately. And what I really want is something that flows nicely but has some interruption of the edges. So I don't want to use a separate mesh here. I want this to all be connected. So what I'm going to do is select this set of edges right through here, and I'm going to bevel these to create essentially a polygon where this edge is. So let's go ahead and bevel, and then if I click and drag out, you'll see this starting to happen. Now this is causing some interruption with the polygon loop above and below, so that's a little too tight. So what I'll do is I'm just going to undo that, and I'm going to add the next edge down to the selection. And then we're going to try this again. So you want to keep an eye for kind of pinching when you're adding detail like this to sub-Ds. So just something to note there. That's why I chose that one. So let's go ahead and pull this out. And what I'm going to do here is just create a buckle based off of this. So I'm going to select this polygon right here, B for the bevel tool, and click, and oops, look what happened. It changed into a circle. And that's because I'm not beveling off of completely sharpened edges, so it's actually causing me to lose my sharpness. All right, but that's all right because it's pretty easy to add this back in. All I need to do is select all of the offending edges right there, Shift W, and click. and now all of a sudden we've got a nicely sharpened edge. Now you notice it's not quite right here. So again, we'll have to select those edges, Shift W, click again, and now we're starting to look pretty good. This is looking pretty buckle-y to me. The only thing is I want to take this whole loop here, and I want it to bevel just out a little bit so it overhangs the rest of the belt. So let's go ahead and press B to get our bevel tool, and now look, it happened again. You'll see this a lot, which is why I'm mentioning it, but we're just going to bevel this out a little bit, and we're going to ignore it for the moment. And then you'll see where we have these diagonal edges due to the bevel. These are going to be where you will lose your edge sharpening. Notice that the other edges are still sharp, but if I just double click on one of those edges, and then I'll press Shift W and click, we'll get back out to our square shape, pretty easily. All right, so there we go. We've got a nice kind of belt buckle now. So the last thing to do here is a little bit of cleanup around the belt area. And you'll notice that since I added in that extra edge bevel, which created the polygon for the belt, that now I have a triangle right here, and then I have n-gons here and here, and here and here. Now, n-gons and triangles are not always a bad thing. You might have them over the surface of an object and it could cause absolutely no problem. So I want to emphasize that n-gons in themselves are not bad. All right. Now, they can cause some issues if they're in areas that are going to deform or where you might want to do additional work. So if you can clean them up, usually my best rule is to clean them up. And then if they are either not disturbing the surface or they're going to be a lot of work to clean up and for very little gain, then you can usually kind of not worry about them. But in this case, we can clean these up very easily. And I want to explain the process here before I do it so that you can see, and we can just go through it very quickly. So if you look at this here, we've got a triangle here. All right, so in order to make this not a triangle, we need to add on an extra vertex. So we need to split one of these edges into two. And usually with a triangle, the best place to do it is on the open edge that's like symmetrical. So if we look at this one, this side and this side, not symmetrical. This bottom edge is symmetrical. So if I select a couple of polys here, run a loop slice, and just set this down to 1 and click, you'll see that now we get an extra edge running down the middle of the buckle, which doesn't cause us any problems. And we get this nicely terminated edge here. And now this is a 4-sided poly. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. And as an added bonus, we could actually take this extra edge in the middle if we wanted and maybe slide it forward to give a little bit of roundness to the buckle. I kind of like that. I think it looks a little better, actually. So I'm going to leave it. All right, so you can do that. You have a lot of different options for cleaning up n-gons or for triangles. Now let's look at the n-gons, and those are up here. So you can see that we have an edge here, and then we have an edge here. So really what we're looking at is essentially 2 separate polygon loops that have been merged into one, going around the rest of the way. So all I have to do is add a loop slice through here, and then just take the open edge and attach it right to there. And we'll see when it happens. So I'm going to go ahead and run loop slice. Again, Alt-C, and just click. You can see that's added in an extra loop. And now what we've got is something that is technically a worse n-gon now, because now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sides instead of 5. But look what happens if I just divide it down the middle. So I'm going to press the C key, click out here, click in here, and there we go. So what we've done is we've changed the direction of the surface flow here in a couple of different places in order to give us more detail here where we need it without adding in a bunch of extra detail down the middle. You know, for example, if I had added an additional edge bevel all the way up through the character and added in an extra loop on either side of the whole center of the character, it would cause a lot of discontinuity that I really didn't need. But by simply splitting off, essentially I'm taking this edge that's coming down here and I'm splitting it off into 2 and then into 3. So now I have 3 full edges to work with where I'd only had 1. And it allows me to very quickly and easily make this model improved. So let's do the same thing on the bottom. Again, I'm just going to select that edge, Alt-C for loop slice and click, and then C for my edge slice tool. Click at this vertex and then in on this vertex. And since I have symmetry on, we're pretty much set there. So I'm going to just make one last little adjustment here on this buckle. Give it a little bit of a beveled look. Yeah, I think that's nice. And you can go along and obviously make as many changes to that as you like, but I think that's good for a simple one. So now we're left with one remaining place here, and that's to give the look of a shirt. So we want some kind of a collar here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same kind of thing that I had done on the sleeves, but I'm going to do it in a slightly different way. So I'm going to bevel this edge. All right, and I'm just going to pull it out. And I'm looking at my values here. I'm at 6 millimeters. I want this to be, maybe half an inch, so 10 or 12 millimeters, something like that. It's always going to look bigger before you sharpen your edges, just a side note here. So maybe something like that, okay? And what I'm going to do, same thing here, is I'm going to take these two edge loops, press L, and Shift W for my weight tool, and just sharpen those up, okay? And now I'm going to take this loop here, and I'm going to bevel it outwards just a little bit, so it gives the impression of a collar. And that could be it. Now, that might be all you want to do, but I want to show one last option that we have here. And let's say I want to level out the edge here that flows around the top, so it's kind of nice and flat, but I want it to retain its contour as it moves around, but I want each individual edge to be flat. I can do that by selecting a series of edges. So let's select this one here and this one here. Then I'm just going to use the up arrow to go around. All right, and then what I want to do is flatten these edges out in their own individual space. As you can see right now, they're kind of tucking down in. So if I turn on the scale tool, all right, we're going to use a custom action center here, and this will actually allow us to do this very easily. So I'm going to go to my selection, and I'm going to change the action center to local, which means that every individual edge will be scaled individually, but they're all going to be scaled based off of their own space, and I want them to flatten down so that they are flat along the grid if we're looking at this like from the side. So what I'm going to do then is go here to my action center and change the axis to auto. And one thing you want to note here as you go to scale these flat is that there can be kind of a skewed sense of which way is up and down. So if I, for example, just take the obvious route and take this direction here and scale that down, you'll see it actually kind of flattened out my collar and I lost it entirely. So that's not the way I want to go. Okay, so let's undo that. So this can be trial and error. Sometimes you'll find it on accident and see, nope, that way didn't work either. All right, because these are not quite flattening out the way we want. So let's undo one more time and let's try, there we go. So now you can see that we've gotten a nice flattening out of those edges. And now the nice thing is that if I wanted to extend this upwards just a little bit, or rather extend the geometry down and tuck it into the collar, all I would need to do is add another edge. So let's use loop slice and set our mode to free, and I'm just going to put a loop way down here at the bottom. Now all I'd have to do would be to take this edge here and move it. And oops, let's set our action center back to automatic. And I'm going to move this down and back in just a little bit and probably scale it just a little bit as well. And now you can see that we've got this little bit of a trough here where the cloth is going to be like overlapping the skin. All right, so I know that's a lot of information. I kind of wanted to give you a bunch of different tools that you can use to work on detailing sub-D objects. And you can go through, I'd really recommend taking a project just like this one, where you take a simple object that's already existing and then look at how you can go in and add details that you want, and look at how you have to isolate your geometry, add more geometry, and then add additional edges or edge weighting in order to get the desired look. So putting all these things together, you can end up with a pretty nice amount of detail fairly quickly. That does it for this one. Thanks, and I will see you in the next lesson.